One of the great joys of church crawling is being able to sort of puzzle out the history of a church building. If you picture your average church, you probably picture something quite Gothic. And the more and more you look into this, there are all these different eras of Gothic, and you can really hammer out exactly when different parts of the church were put together.
You're listening to Come Here, the podcast for and about heritage attractions, where you can discover somewhere worth visiting. I'm your host, Dr. Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist with a background in archaeology, specialising in voiceover for the heritage sector. Each week, I chat to someone from a different museum, historic site, gallery or cultural space about why you should visit, and exactly what you can expect when you get there. Sophie Clark is the Church Development Officer for Lincoln Diocese. In this episode, she tells us all about the upcoming West Lindsey Churches Festival and the hobby of church crawling. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today, Sophie.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So can you tell us what your title is and what your role is, please?
So I'm the Church Development Officer for the Diocese of Lincoln, and I help to support churches to really be at the heart of their communities, for churches who are looking to diversify their offering, essentially for churches who are looking to be open more. So obviously church tourism is very much under my job description, and that's why I'm becoming involved with the Churches Festival.
Yeah. So whereabouts are you based?
I'm actually based in the lovely Edward King House, just outside the cathedral here in Lincoln.
So we might hear the bells at some point then.
Oh, definitely.
So what does a typical day look like for you? What do you get involved in, Sophie?
Well, it's amazing the different kind of projects that churches might bring to me. Often this is all about accessibility. That's a really big thing that we're focusing on at the moment. And that isn't just things like hearing loops and ramps. That's things like making our churches more welcoming for people who might be neurodivergent, for example. I also help a lot with sort of hospitality projects, so a lot of facilities and serveries so that churches can put on those all-important afternoon teas, of course.
Absolutely. How does Lincolnshire compare to other counties in terms of the number of churches? I mean, we're a big county, very rural county. Have we got a lot of churches compared to other places?
Well, this is it. Across our diocese, we are responsible for just about 615 churches.
Wow. And are all of them still in use?
Yes, so that's 615, and the vast majority are, yes.
And how many of those are, actually open every day for people to go and visit?
We are incredibly spoiled by the willingness of our church communities to keep those churches open as much as possible. It's fantastic when I'm working with a church and I hear from them that they are open 365 days a year.
And is that something that you would encourage churches to do then?
Oh, absolutely. And of course we can understand the various worries around having that door unlocked. But in fact, it makes it so much better for everyone involved if the community know that there are people around wanting to look inside, and they know who to expect when they're there.
Yeah, and actually something that I heard at a meeting recently was that if your church is open during the day, it actually makes your insurance cheaper.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, even the insurers prefer it. As I said, it's really that idea that if there are people around, that's all the better for the churches.
Yeah. So tell me about the hobby of church crawling. What is it?
So church crawling really is this kind of quite independent church tourism. It's a fantastic way, certainly in my opinion, to go around spending your time, mostly making the most of those open churches. You can find all sorts of different things in these churches. It's very personal what you might choose to take from it. Obviously there is the religious element and a sense of engaging with that on an independent level. But of course we know that there is so much history and heritage to be found. I come from a museums and heritage background, so you might like to look at the architecture of a church. One of the great joys of church crawling is being able to sort of puzzle out the history of a church building. If you picture your average church, you probably picture something quite Gothic. And the more and more you look into this, there are all these different eras of Gothic, and you can really hammer out exactly when different parts of the church were put together. You can put together the different roles of the areas of the church, And it's also quite an interesting puzzle when each one is so unique and has different things to offer.
Yeah. So do you have any idea what sort of numbers of people are church crawlers?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. I mean, certainly the communities online, some of the biggest church crawlers out there have tens of thousands of people following them and keeping an eye on what they're doing.
Yeah, that is brilliant. So tell us about some of the highlights that people can see in our county in Lincolnshire.
Well, we're spoiled to have quite a big amount of the county covered by our churches festivals. I think, of course, when I got into this role, the first thing I did was see exactly how many of our churches I had already visited. And on totting up, that was a third of the churches in the county.
So, yes, tell us a bit more about the festival. Who runs the festival and where does it actually take place?
So we have 2 churches festivals that cover Lincolnshire. Primarily the big one coming up is our West Lindsey Churches Festival, where there are 120 churches in and around the West Lindsey District that will be open this May.
And where does West Lindsey cover for anyone not familiar with Lincolnshire?
So that is the sort of more northerly and westerly area from Lincoln.
And I believe it's the 30th year of the festival this year.
It is, yes.
And so tell us what people can expect if they come along to visit some of the churches. What's going on?
So the Churches Festival website is brilliant in that it breaks down all of the different wonderful things that you can find in our churches, and you can really pick out the sorts of things that you're most interested in. Some of the churches, for example, will have their church organ available to play. Some of them will have concerts for different talented musicians.
And refreshments, I'm sure, are a big part of it.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Those all-important refreshments. There are actually dozens of churches involved in this upcoming festival that are offering those lunches and afternoon teas. I think actually the most different and interesting thing that one of our churches is offering is actually teddy parachuting up in Cadney.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, bring your teddy along and chuck him off the roof.
Oh, it's fantastic to see the different kinds of things that our church communities come up with.
Yeah. And is the festival, is it suitable for children to come along to? Are there things for kids to do?
Yes, absolutely. So many of our churches offer different activities. They can be based on maybe taking a trail around the church, or for the more adventurous families, you might like to take on a tower tour and climb up all of the steps.
Oh, yes. And are dogs welcome in most of the churches?
Yes, absolutely. It's something that these churches are something that you'll find in our lovely rural areas of the county, so perfectly situated on different dog walking routes, and I don't doubt that so many of our communities will be happy to welcome them in too. And especially if we get the excellent weather we're hoping for, it'll be a nice cool break, not just for us, but our four-legged friends as well.
Yeah. Do you have any information about what the oldest church is that will be open, or the newest church?
Oh, certainly. Some of our churches stretch back to even Saxon foundations, and there will be traces of that you can spot in their architecture.
Yeah. And you mentioned organs and people being able to play the organs, but what about outside the church, in the churchyards? What can people see there?
So many of our churchyards are real havens for nature, and so there'll be a really lovely space to spend some time perhaps looking for the different flora and fauna that you might find. Equally, of course, the graveyards are really replete with church artwork on each of these individual headstones, and you might even find a few unexpected historical figures that have connections to our churches.
Yeah. Do you have a personal favourite amongst all these churches?
Oh, it's so hard to pick a favourite, and having visited so many as well, you get to see how they are all special in their own way. But if I'm really pushed, I do have to say that the one we keep going back to would be Grayingham, St Radegund. And that is one of only 5 churches in the country dedicated to St Radegund, who was a 6th century monarch, so not somebody recent at all. And I was so pleased recently to see that last year they were able to open their new servery and facilities that just extends the fantastic welcome they've been offering for the 10 years or so I've been visiting the festival.
Yeah. And there's another festival as well, isn't there, later in the year? What area does that cover?
Yes, so we also have the Walton Coast Festival, and that takes place in September. and this year on the 5th and 6th and the 12th and 13th.
Are any of the churches covered by both festivals, or is it a completely different set of churches?
No, so it's pretty much a different set of churches. It gives you a really broad spread across the county to go and explore.
Yeah. So how can you get started with church crawling? I think you mentioned about there being online communities. Where can people find those?
Well, for these two festivals, they do have their own dedicated website. Otherwise, the best way to get started church crawling is to go and have a look at your local church. But when you're out and about in the area, churches will have open signs outside, and just get your foot through the door and you'll soon see what's so special about this very interesting hobby.
Yeah. And are you aware of any other sort of similar festivals in other parts of the country?
So some of our neighbouring counties do. Often this ties into the Heritage Open Days in September as well, where within that national event you'll see lots of different churches open, actually all across the country.
Yeah. Are there any sort of unusual things that people might come across in a church?
There are a couple of really wonderful, unusual examples of churches that we have in our county. As mentioned already, you might generally picture something medieval, something Gothic when you think about a church. But something I think that we have is really special are a couple of Georgian examples of churches. And on the very small end of the scale, we have Cherry Willingham, St Peter and St Paul. And at the very large end of the scale, we have Gainsborough All Saints. And the decor that you find inside is perhaps more what you would expect of a stately home, of a National Trust property, than what you might think a church looks like.
Yeah, and some of them are quite off the beaten track too, aren't they?
Oh yes, you will find that this will take you on some interesting travels around the Lincolnshire countryside, and I think it shows you just how special our county is and how I think we hide our light under a bushel a little bit, both by virtue of being such a large county and such a rural county as well.
Yeah. So do you get people trying to visit as many churches as they can in a day?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I think after a while it starts to get a bit competitive.
I know I've been going to the festival for, the last 20 years probably, and I forget which churches I've been to and which I haven't. Every time the brochure comes out I think, that sounds interesting, and then I get there and think, actually I came here a few years ago.
Yes, we often find the same too, but it's that same brilliant welcome that you find at each of them that makes it all the worthwhile.
Yeah. They're not all manned though, are they?
No, this is it. Some of our churches are more open for quiet contemplation, which I think is a really rewarding part of the festival as well.
Yeah. And do you find that there are lots of churches that have got guidebooks or audio tours available?
Yes, certainly a few of the churches do, and that's a really wonderful way to engage with them, even in those instances where perhaps there isn't a local tour guide ready to show you around.
Yeah, it's always useful to have a little map of the church, and you're telling you about all the different parts of it and when they were built and so on, because so many of them have been added to, haven't they, over the centuries?
Exactly, and those guidebooks again are a really great way to get started in church crawling. Something that you come across quite often when you start to look at church crawling and finding out about the history of churches is people will suggest to get a Pevsner's architectural guide for Lincolnshire. But I find that can be quite full of architectural jargon, as wonderful as it is, as much as it's something I would advocate for too. Those church guidebooks are put together by the people that know the church best, the people who are there enjoying it all the time. And although they may contain their fair share of tall tales, that is certainly part of the fun of church crawling too.
Yeah. So how can people find out more information about the festival and which churches are open when?
So there's a whole host of churches open in this festival. There's 120 for the West Lindsey Churches Festival, and that can all be found on the Churches Festival website, which is churchesfestival.info.
And I know quite a few of the churches that are taking part have also got brochures that you can pick up, haven't they? And then you can take that around with you to find all the different ones.
Yes, exactly. Out at the churches there are brochures available for pickup. They can also be found in the tourist information.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for being my guest, and maybe I'll bump into you while we're church crawling at the Churches Festival.
Yes, you never know.
Thanks for listening to Come Here. If you know a heritage attraction that would love to be featured, or you have a suggestion for somewhere you'd like me to cover, I'd love to hear from you. To find my email address and find out more about me, pop to my website at lizdrury.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, rate and review the show. It really helps other people to find it. See you next time, and come and discover somewhere else worth visiting.